When we first started in venturing into the digital signage space, obviously the objective at first was nothing specific, right? It was, let's get your team together and put some content up on the screen, and as long as it's reliable, as long as we make some changes, great. That was 7 years ago. As time evolved from that 6 to 9 location to 834, the overall objective of just simply putting an image or content on the screen has changed.
Hello, and welcome to Behind the Screens. We're very pleased to be joined today by Robert Mays, who was until recently VP Information Technology at WeWork. And he joined when they were, I think, had about 6 offices and scaled with them to sort of 800 plus offices worldwide. And part of his responsibilities was to ensure that WeWork had an effective digital signage strategy across the locations. And in many ways, there probably isn't anyone on the planet who has quite the experience that Robert has when it comes to scaling up a complex, multifaceted, multi-use case digital signage strategy in record speed. So we're really excited to be talking to Robert today on the podcast, and we're sure there's going to be some huge nuggets of gold for anyone facing the challenges of implementing a digital signage strategy at scale. And I should also mention that Robert has recently joined ScreenCloud as our VP of Enterprise Solution, which is great news for us. And it means that when we're helping our customers with the various challenges they're facing, we have Robert's expertise and experience to draw upon too. So without further ado, let's jump straight in. Robert, welcome. Thanks for joining us today. Could we maybe start by you just giving us a quick overview of who you are and how you would describe what your sort of core expertise is when it comes to digital signage?
Okay. First of all, I'm extremely excited to be on the call. I've been doing IT now for the past 25 years. My most recent experience, as you just stated, has been in the co-working space. And one of the particular reason I really enjoy that business and the challenge that go along with it is the opportunity to actually connect with people. And digital signage has a major influence when it comes to that. I have worked across multiple verticals, from retail to hospitalities, from manufacturing to financials, to obviously the last 7 years of my life has been within the co-working industry. And the common theme for all of the IT leadership across all of those verticals are pretty much the same. 25 years ago to today, it's how do we turn an organization, an IT organization, into a organization that not only exceed our internal and external customers, but how do we utilize IT infrastructure like digital signage to make that type of an impact? So that's what I've been doing for the last 7 years with the co-working company.
And I suppose obviously WeWork, everybody's heard of them everywhere, super famous. And I think you said that when you joined the company there were only 6 offices and you scaled to 800 offices in a very short space of time. When you were kind of first in those 6 offices and you were thinking about digital signage, did you have any idea what it might become? And also, I guess, how did it change over that time? I'm guessing pretty fundamentally, night and day.
I think when we first started in venturing into the digital signage space, obviously the objective at first was nothing specific, right? It was, let's get your team together and put some content up on the screen, and as long as it's reliable, as long as we make some changes, great. That was 7 years ago. As time evolved from that 6 to 9 location to 834, the overall objective of just simply putting an image or content on the screen has changed. It went through a life cycle of how do digital signage impact our communities and our members that renting office spaces from us. the content has to be impacting from a emotional perspective. It has to be impacting from an educational perspective. And it also has to invite people into a discussions of what is currently going on with that space. So the challenge for me and for all of us, including ScreenCloud, is if we look at it from a global perspective, the challenge I had was, do I do that on a global perspective or do I do that on a regional, local perspective? Right? So WeWork grew from 9 to 800 plus location, and along with that comes a lot of cultural variances, language barrier that we have to deal with. So how do we actually apply what we're currently doing and make sure that it give that three impact I was talking about: educate, invite, and it trigger an emotion, whether it's in English or Japanese or Korean or any other languages that we have office space in all over EMEA. So it is, the objective has changed over time, obviously, and at the very beginning, it was extremely easy. Put content up on the screen, make sure we can do some advertising about the events that's currently going on, and make sure that it's always up and running. That was it. That was the minimum requirement. And as I stated, as time grew, as we evolved, it become a lot more than just putting content on the screen, right? It went from static images to engaging video content into making sure that the network infrastructure that we have in place can support such a demand. We were rolling out, oh geez, thousands and thousands of screens over a period of 7 years. And the challenge is, how do we maintain that consistency? How do we make sure that the communication that we're providing to our end users, whether it's internal to WeWork or a member that's renting space from us, that message is consistent across the board, whether you're sitting in London or New York or Tokyo or Amsterdam.
Yeah, that network infrastructure thing is really, really interesting. I mean, I'm guessing when people first come to do this, like, there must be kind of rookie mistakes that you saw. I know when we spoke earlier, you said that, sometimes you had to kind of be parachuted in to kind of rescue projects that were going a bit sideways. Like, what were the things that people ran into, and without that experience, what kind of things came up again? Yeah,
I think hindsight's always 2020. Looking back on some of the, and I wouldn't call them rookie mistake. I would call them just lesson learned as we were growing along. It started off even from a design stage on where should we put the digital signage that would make an impact, right, when people come into the office. Are we looking at the front desk when people actually walk into our environment, or are we looking at that 10 or 15 second that you have to capture someone's attention while they're in the elevator? Or do we put that in the hallway or in the lobby when they enter our buildings? Some of the common mistakes that we've made along the way, it's down to the networking aspect. It's down to low voltage cabling aspect. One of the things that we experience a lot is we would go in, put up a digital signage, and obviously every TV would be displaying content, and we only have one power outlet. Never thought about putting in additional power outlet for redundancy, right? Second one would be a lot of the devices run on Ethernet connection. We would do a one Cat5 or Cat6 cable drop to that area, never thinking that, if something were to go wrong with cabling, that digital content or the digital signage hardware is not going to work. So we end up going back and having to do dual cable run just for redundancy. It's putting in an infrastructure in place to make sure that the content that we're providing and the environment and the space, from low voltage to IT equipment, is always redundant. And does not introduce a single point of failure into any of our environment. So there was a lot of lesson learned growing from, like I said, 9 to over 800. So the biggest challenge, and I'm going to mention this from a networking perspective, is, and this would touch on, a little bit of security aspect. A lot of those digital signage would be in the lobby, and sometimes it's difficult to broadcast Wi-Fi signal to the lobby area because it's just most enterprise customer wouldn't do that. Unless you step foot into our facility. So now, how do we overcome that and make sure that we provide the same security, the same features, the same functionality if you were inside of a workspace? So we learned that lesson along the way as well by making sure that our Wi-Fi signal is strong enough to broadcast that to where the digital signage is located. So it's a lot of lesson learned along the way.
I can imagine in some organizations as well, it might, I mean, obviously you were going in and this was a kind of priority for you. And I guess for the leadership of WeWork, it was a strategic, decision that screens were important. They were going to be an important part of, I guess, talking about the brand, talking about the members of and people who were sort of based there. But I suppose in other organizations, it might not be, those kind of technical infrastructure things might be a harder challenge to overcome, I guess, or not. What do you think? I mean, obviously you could probably say, right, guys, you need to have the right kind of cabling. You need to have a strong Wi-Fi signal because this is non-negotiable. We can't have rubbish signage in the lobby.
Yeah, I think the luxury that we have while going through this process is going back to my original introduction, where the particular reason for working in a co-working space is you connect with people, right? You learn about the infrastructure, and within our spaces we had financial institution that would come in that has very strict security compliance policy. We would have banking institution that would come in and rent office spaces from us that has the same compliant policy, but with different hardware and different requirements. So looking at that, our ultimate goal and objective is to make sure that when our members are displaying information, content that is internal to their team members, that those information are secure. Those information for the eyes of those internal users. And what infrastructure do we put in place to make sure that whatever they're doing within their network is fall within their compliance and their regulatory mandate? So that was a very challenging aspect from a co-working space perspective. But through a lot of lesson learned, we were able to provide solution playbooks that meet the majority or most of those requirements that they were looking for. Keep in mind, as the growth of spaces went from 9 to over 800, we were no longer going after 10-person office or 20-person office spaces. We are selling spaces where an enterprise customer would take a whole entire floor or sometime a whole entire building. And obviously, they are renting space from us, but it is within their area, within their IT requirement, their security compliance, their audio-visual mandate that certain things need to be done a certain way. So how do we actually make that changes to meet what they're looking for from a requirements perspective? And every customer, it's a little unique. So it was a great lesson learned.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned there about the playbook. So is this something you created for people being able to roll out things quickly when they went to new offices and stuff?
I think data is, and the way we gather data is probably the most powerful tool we have. Looking at how we deploy things and looking at it from a data analytics perspective. The playbook was put in place not only for digital content or digital signage, but there's playbook for how do you actually open a space. There's checklists that everybody must go through to make sure that a building is open at 100% for IT, for AV, for security, and of course, digital signage fall into that category. So the playbook was put together based on the need of the fact that we wanted to make everything as seamless as possible and make everything as what I would consider a cookie cutter process that is repeatable, that is scalable. And not only do we have that playbook internally for our staff, we also drafted a playbook externally for our strategic partner on what is required to make sure that our space is working at an optimum level, whether it's bringing in an internet circuit, how is that internet circuit actually being terminated, from purchasing and sourcing and procuring, digital signage hardware to routers, switches, firewall, wireless devices. All that has a playbook. And at the end of every month or at the end of every opening, we actually have a scorecard that we measured ourselves against. And we also measure our strategic partner against. And it's based on deliverable, based on performance, based on, did they actually complete what they stated were going to complete? So it was actually a benchmark that we actually provide not only to ourselves, but a feedback to our strategic partner on what to do going forward. So it was a great tool to have.
It's interesting because you've come from an IT background, but you were talking quite earlier on. You were talking about the more around the content requirements and how people view it and why people view it and stuff like that. Which is maybe that's not unusual, but it's kind of quite often you imagine that people in IT would just be worried about the kind of networking and hardware and security, but obviously you're kind of thinking beyond that as well, thinking about literally how people are going to use it and how they're going to sort of work with it. But I'm just thinking, like, when you're creating these, what we call a company TV strategy, that will come. The inputs will come from multiple people. So you've got marketing, you've got business information, you might have people, HR kind of communication, as well as real-time communication about what's actually going on in the building, maybe IoT stuff that's coming through. So how do you kind of navigate that in a big organization like WeWork? Where does that content come from? Who's managing it? Who's responsible for it in different locations? Just be interested to.
That's a tough nut to crack. I would have to say it's evolved as the growth happened during the last 7 years, right? It started off with one department inside the company that was the sole ownership of what to be displayed on the screen. And that fall under the branding vertical. We want to make sure that everything we do internally is on brand. And then as time evolved and as technology evolved, as we come to realize that we can put more content than just static images into music, into HTML web pages, into Power BI, into video content. Now, those ownership changes. It went from branding now to marketing. We like to have data on, how they're doing from an outbound marketing strategy that they're currently running. They like to see that data in real time. It went from marketing to finance, an organization that really want to concentrate on looking at the numbers. What is the occupancy rate of a building that we just opened? If a building has 1,000 members as of today, what is the percentage of that building that is currently occupied? Down to an IT organization now that wants to look at, all of the IT, AV, and security equipment, all the IoT devices that is certainly on the network. How is that up and operational? Why is it not up and operational? And one of the things that we spent a lot of time on was on the security aspect. We monitor all of our CCTV devices. We have the ability to actually log into every single location and have the ability to pull the content, the data from those CCTV and see which camera is actually up or which camera is actually off. So it was an evolving process that started off from branding. And by the time I left, I believe it almost touches every department within the company. Everybody wants information. They want data. I mean, a funny story that I have is while we were growing, we had what they call a network operations center room where there was just nothing but, 42, 45, 55 inches TV all over the room as soon as you walk in. And we were small at that time. I think we had maybe 20, 25, 30 locations at that time. And there was about each TV was given a location name. And that location name pulled data of everything that's going on in that building, from IT tickets to bills that hasn't been paid to power consumption to what camera is working, what camera's not working, to you know occupancy rate, to sales data on what's in the pipeline, on who's moving in, on who's moving out. We couldn't maintain that for over 800 locations. I couldn't see a room with 800 TVs, but it's involved from just being a branding initiative, and it ended up touching everyone within the company. And when we start expanding internationally, I think our first location internationally was actually in the UK at the Sea Container Building. And once we start expanding uh, internationally, we decided that the content that should be displayed should be the responsibility of the team that's running that region from a regional perspective. Obviously, there's a process where it has to be on brand. It has to make sure that, like I said, touches those three things I'm talking about, right? Making an impact from an emotional perspective, educate and invite people to a discussion. So it gotten started off with a very small set of people that were in control of it. Now to every region has someone that's actually looking over what is being communicated out onto those TV screen or out onto those digital signage within our facility. So it makes a huge impact, not only from communication perspective, but it also broadcasts a communication where all of our members within our space can see exactly what's going on that day from an event perspective. So it's huge.
Mm. Yeah, no, I mean, I can see how. I mean, definitely in other conversations we've had with customers, I know that there is always that kind of balance between local content, localized content, and local content, and that could be local as in regional, but it could also be local as in departmental. So it could be, you know, content for the marketing team, or it could be content for the London office, and the balance between that and kind of corporate head office content. And
I I think the funny thing is we still would always, from a corporate perspective, like to have control and visibility into what is being displayed regionally down to the site level. So when we were looking at a solution and through that growth, um, from an IT executive perspective, we wanted to have that feature and functionality, right? Being able to actually see what content is being displayed, making sure that if we want to push content out to those sites from a corporate headquarters, we have the ability to do that. Um, Obviously, it is up to the individual team members at the site level that would communicate that to the regional level, and the regional level would communicate that to the corporate level on what content they want to display. So it's involved to static images now to, oh my God, multi videos, running multiple videos with, content that just nonstop. I think I did a building in Bangalore. We had 9 55-inch TV that's interconnected, and having to run digital content over that and making sure that it works seamlessly was a challenge in itself. And now today, you see that everywhere you go from a digital signage perspective.
So how are you able to kind of measure how effective, or was there any measurement? I mean, clearly, as I said earlier, like this is clearly a kind of strategic thing right across WeWork. There was no question that you weren't going to, in every office that you opened, you weren't going to have a strong digital signage. That was just part of the brand, part of everything that happened. But was there any kind of measurement about, what kind of ROI are you getting out of all of this? Is it working? Is it working well in London, but not so well in India or Bangalore or whatever, or Shanghai? Is there any sort of sense of that?
From a marketing perspective, that's extremely hard to put down on to a static number, right? To a finite, success rate. But we measure that in terms of digital content displaying events that's currently going on in the building, for example. We'll measure that based on the turnout of our members within our space while they are showing up for those events that's being advertised through a digital signage perspective. So that's one way of measuring it. We also turn that into a standard for all of our location. The marketing campaign is very hard to measure, but you can tell based on sales and occupancy rate that, when you're doing a tour of our space, the digital content actually show the availability of office spaces on what floor and, the number of desks that's being available. I guess you can measure the success rate of that content based on the number of occupancy rate in that building, because we do advertise spaces, availability, price point, and special promotion that's currently going on. So you would probably see the marketing campaign being success in that perspective if the building is occupied. But from a raw data perspective, very little.
I mean, you actually did you were able to monetize monetize digital signage to an extent as well. Is that correct?
To a certain extent, we looked at managing content for our small, mid-sized enterprise customer, and we provide services in terms of making sure that the digital content, whether it's images or videos or anything they want to be displayed, is on brand. So that was a product offering that we provided globally, and it's part of an IT offering that we do across the board. Anything from IT services to audio visual to security services, and digital content or digital signage was also one of those. It's giving space to our members to do advertising to other members within that space.
So I suppose, you've kind of gone through all this. That was like a massive learning curve, I imagine, for anyone, going from such few offices to, and I think, as you said, when we discussed before, like literally when you first started, it was literally a case of getting flash drives and sticking into the back of screens and things. Moving up to something that's obviously a lot more sophisticated and considered and robust and everything. What are you kind of most excited about the next 12 months in terms of where this is all heading, and I guess what you're doing? Clearly now you're working at ScreenCloud, so that's kind of interesting. But what are you most excited about in terms of where you see things heading?
I think one of the reasons that I fell in love with this company is the fact that what we're currently doing have an impact on our users, on our customers. And I think we have the ability to make a major change in the way we actually communicate content internally for our customers. It is an opportunity that you have the ability to shape the way people look at data going forward. And I think currently right now, where digital content is heading, it's going to be more powerful today than what it was, let's say 5 years ago, right? Or even a year ago. We are looking at how do we actually utilize business intelligence and data analytics to actually provide that data to our end users, right? How does corporation and enterprise customer are looking to display that content? And I think there was a study that was done that the majority of employees uh, missed a lot of internal communication emails because they just don't read it. Now, if you put something that is impacting from a content perspective on a digital signage where people are seeing that on a daily basis, I think it makes a major impact to what enterprise customer can do from a data perspective. Now you're seeing communications not being overlooked. You're seeing that important communication that need to be seen are actually being seen. You know, the consistency of your message are being given to your team members. They're not being overlooked. And it's more impacting visually than from an email that people just sit down and read. So right now, I mean, the thing that excited me and I'm passionate about is how this platform today can make an impact on how people actually work. And I think ScreenCloud would have a major role in that.
Yeah, I mean, definitely we're seeing, everyone's talking about what the new normal is going to be look like, how we're going to kind of connect people together. And in many ways, you know, I'm not trying to do a pitch for ScreenCloud here, but in many ways, that need to be more connected, more engaged, more kind of aware of what's going on in the company is kind of even more, you know, if you go into the office and people are kind of working from home some of the time and going into the office other times, there's even more need there to make sure that people are properly connected across the company. So,
I think I'm an old guy sitting here, and traditionally, you know, you grew up talking about, you know, going into the office, working a 9 to 5, and with the new norm where you have remote workers that maybe come into the office with a flexibility or the flexible work schedule, you miss that, what I call a water fountain conversation, right? Some of those conversations probably have a huge impact than just sitting at your desk doing your work. And I think with the ability to broadcast those type of visual content and people are getting to see that when they're coming in the office maybe twice or 3 times a week and may have overlooked emails because of, you know, the current activity of the day, I think that's impacting. And it give us the ability to look forward to where we could be 12, 24, and 36 months from now. And I think from my perspective, if we can hit on those 3 components that I keep going back to, right? It's to educate and to invite and to make that emotional impact. Well, I think we'll be in a better place.
Cool. Well, that sounds like quite a good place a positive place to end. Thanks so much for your time today. It's really good. If people want to kind of hit you up, is it best to kind of talk to you on Twitter, or how do they kind of get to know more about Robert?
The best way to hit me up, honestly, probably is via my email address. I mean, it's robert.mays@screencloud.io. I'm not big on Twitters. It's just that IT aspect of me, the security thing in the back of my head, the social media. So yeah, the best thing for me to do is reach out to me directly. And I would be more than happy to be engaged in anything that's come my way from a question perspective.
Cool. Okay, well, awesome. Thanks so much again for your time. And yeah, until next time.
Thank you.